With a Klein Iron Show. First visit by John B. Wells from Caravan to Midnight. John, you have an amazing show. I listened to you over on Coast to Coast Radio for years, and now your own show, Caravan to Midnight, and you've had a tremendous following, I guess, over the last few years. You've really built your following up, and I guess it's your talent at being able to investigate and follow leads, and get the best out of your guests to try to, make people think. I guess one of the hardest things is you can't make people change their mind, but you can, through entertainment, through proper interviewing, through poetry, art, music, you can change people's perspective. And that actually is an art. And when you do that, people then will change their mind on their own. And you have a talent at that. So your show is pretty amazing. So how do people listen to you over at Caravan to Midnight show?
Well, first of all, thanks very much, Dr. Bill, for having me on, and thank you for those kind words. It was, I like to say I owe it all to the great one, otherwise I'd be just another slow waiter on the floor of your least favorite restaurant, more than likely. We don't have sponsors per se. We have members, and it's a $60 a year deal, and people can, some people out there are really having trouble. But virtually everybody can go $5 a month, and so we break it down into quarters. They can buy a $15 thing for 3 months, 30 for 6 and 60 for the year, and it's worked out pretty well. And the best part of it is that for whatever happened on Coast to Coast AM, I am very, very happy to have had that experience. It was it was really just a great. It was a great time. I had so much fun. It was a little weird trying to get one's circadian rhythms under control, just doing one night a week from midnight to 0400 in the great American Southwest. But but it was worth it. And so, like I say, the best part is that for whatever happened at Coast, a lot of just wonderful people are willing to come on the program, and we put them at ease, and they're free to say what they want, and I'm not going to interrupt them. Or, you're talking about changing their minds. I have a real problem with somebody's just about to give you the key to the meaning of life, and then it's like, let's take a call. It's like, we're not doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, on your show, you mentioned earlier before the show started that you interviewed Linda Moulton, who's a great investigator. And she investigates. She's what I call a forensic investigator of the weird, wonderful, and what you don't want to believe. I guess I call it the room where these are questions you shouldn't ask in public, but she does, and she does a really good job of the forensic investigation of them, which it's pretty damning in terms of. And if she doesn't have all the answers, what she likes to do is she does what I think is most important: ask better questions. She does a really good job of that. Tell her what she's into lately. Because you did this on your show, I guess, the latest show.
We were talking about this sound that's being heard all over the world. And she had a recording of it, and just from Kiev and then some places in the United States, and this like metallic sound, and it keeps popping up. There was I can't remember the name of the program. It was NASA identified it as Blue something. I can't remember at this moment. It's an article that goes back to 2013. That's what I was able to pull up. But she said this has been increasing since 2011.
Right.
And, we just, of course, I don't have the kind of bona fides that you do, let alone the CV to go with it. But, we just kind of tossed a few ideas around as to what it might be.
What did she think? Because they should document the sounds you can hear from all over the planet. If you go up on YouTube, you'll see them. I can give you my theory again. It's one that can easily be tested out because our government's been doing what's called gravity wave imaging for decades, since the 50s and early 60s. And when they first put their satellites up to do gravity wave assessment of movement of Russian submarines at the bottom of the ocean, they looked at the gravity wave distortions that could be created by a large submarine so they could eventually get down to a signature. And therefore they could actually image of a satellite was disturbing the gravity wave flux field of the planet. Now, gravity waves travel faster than light, so they've got faster than light imaging that can look at deep space. And this ties in with the CERN project, which is to map the galactic natural wormholes that are created in the Higgs field of our galaxy that allow you to transfer across the galaxy. It's 100,000 light years. It also is detecting in deep space gravity waves coming in from an approaching dwarf star that returns every 3,650 years. The ancients called Herculebus, or the destroyer, There's ancient cartouches in Egypt where you can see this. I talked to astrophysicist Professor McCanney, and there's 5 layers to our magnetosphere. The top 3 are in the outer, what's called Van Allen radiation belt. The next is at the layer called the upper troposphere, that's the ionosphere that regulates our weather. And in a sense, it's integrated, locked like gears to the outer magnetosphere that's affected by solar and galactic effects. And then the bottom layer is what's called the lithospheric or keeper magnet kind of layer that's in the lithosphere or the crust of the Earth where there's telluric currents. That's why when you have an earthquake about to happen, you'll often see strange animal behavior, and you'll see also telluric currents driving worms out of the ground or animals and so on. What's happening in the upper atmosphere, my theory, is that these gravity waves cause a distortion in the plasma field of the upper atmosphere, and when the plasma field collapses, it creates sound. It's pretty simple. It's like you heat it up or distort it, and then as it collapses, it creates a sound effect.
Well, my question would be, how does it create what are the mechanics involved in creating a sound wave?
Well, what happens is you basically change the plasma physics by charging up energy. When the gravity wave passes through the upper ionosphere, it literally heats it up so many degrees. You create a tubular heated structure, and then as it collapses, it literally forms a sound, just like if you're blowing through a tube. So you've got an area where there's a boundary zone between hotter and cooler areas of plasma in the upper atmosphere, and as it collapses, it creates sound. It's really pretty straightforward. You might be just the man to you might be. Go ahead. I'm sorry. So basically, that's how it happens. Now, what happens is I took care of the team in Antarctica in 1994-95 that went to our McMurdo Bay, Antarctica Pi Meson scope, which is under the ice shelf. It's very large. It's several miles across. And we also have an international consortium of nations that are looking at the IRIS infrared telescopes in deep space and Chandra X-ray telescopes. But the most classified was what's called the gravitonic scope. They're actually looking in deep space at the approach of a dwarf star. And people need to understand this in terms of astrophysics, and you can verify it. For every star in our galaxy, there's about 240 to 260 billion stars of all sizes. There's 10,000 dwarf stars that are around or bred, and the reason is they last so long. These, because they burn so slowly, the average dwarf star will last between 10 and 100 trillion years. And as a result, long after most of the stars are burnt out, there'll be still lots of dwarf stars. And most of them are at anywhere from 5 to 7 degrees above absolute zero. But they have the red dwarfs have a very powerful geomagnetic field and a very powerful what's called gravity wave effect. That gravity wave effect means when they move in, they actually change the plasma physics of stars. And people need to understand this according to Professor McCanney's theory. They had this old theory that stars were heated from the center, and the star would have a big nuclear fusion reaction occurring in the center of the star. With his theory, and I agree with him, is that the nuclear physics of a star actually draws in hydrogen from the atmosphere of the galaxy and causes nuclear fusion to occur to create helium-3, and helium-3 is actually the driver of the nuclear fusion engine on the sun, and the stream of helium-3 ions is what, of course, is crystallizing on objects outside the magnetosphere of the Earth on the moon, which hits the Bolshak wave of our magnetosphere and actually concentrates it on the moon, so there's 500,000 times more helium-3 on the surface of the moon in crystals than there is on Earth. And it's the primary fuel of helium-3 tokamak fusion reactors we use for our interplanetary spacecraft, which we have. And I described this for years, and finally Lockheed Martin, embarrassed last year, came out and said, yes, we do have this technology, and it's exactly, literally word for word, how I explained how the technology works, because I was told this by people at our Q-level security clearance at U.S. Space Command years ago. And the fact is they're hiding Tier 1 science in every area you can imagine, from life extension technology to energy technology to interplanetary travel to interacting with advanced civilizations from other worlds to space weather and the approach of this dwarf star, which the globalists are panicking over. So that's why they're building underground cities and tunneling all over the world like crazy. They are in panic.
I feel like those depictions of Moses coming down from the mountain where his head's expanded, and it's as wide as his shoulders. That's amazing. So let me ask you this: you may be just the man to answer this question. I've been thinking for a long time, and I am not a theoretical physicist. Keep that thought. We'll be right back.
Keep that thought.
I'll hold it.
Yeah, you had a really interesting show with Linda Moulton Howe, and I guess we got on the break. We went on a whole bunch of rabbit trails. I guess to say those rabbit trails are deep, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. One of the things that Linda brought up was was some reports she's getting that the core of the Earth is going through some changes, and this all came from. It is. Well, she said that one of the symptoms that a witness to the audio part of the whatever that is, the Gabriel's trumpet or whatever.
That's what call it. The trumpet blast. Yeah.
Was this feeling of, well, one man had a concussion wave hit at the side of his garage, and another woman felt a slapping on her feet that was, from under the ground, that was unpleasant. And so we really didn't discuss, we didn't get to the bottom of what's happening there. We were just mostly discussing the symptoms that people are experiencing, the oral ones as well as the physical ones.
Right. You also see psychic changes. For example, when these gravity waves hit, you get a plasma field. For example, before the sun releases a coronal mass ejection or a filament falls on the surface of the sun, it releases a gravity wave which changes the T1 half or the half-life of radioisotopes on the Earth. And theoretically, if you had the right harmonic gravity wave frequency, you can shatter any isotope or take in nuclear material and make it non-nuclear by splitting it like a diamond. So gravity waves are actually faster than light energy, if you want to call it. That's what makes dark matter and dark energy. What they're basically perceiving is they're perceiving physical changes in the Earth, because when a gravity wave hits, it can actually charge up enough energy to the outer lithospheric layer that there's a differential gravity effect on the mantle of the Earth and the surface, but also deeper in the outer molten core and in the solid inner core. And that actual rotating plasma field is what creates the magnetosphere of the Earth. It's stripping off electrons against radioisotopes in the core because of thorium, strontium, and plutonium, etc. that are deep in our Earth, because our Earth is a rotating nuclear magnet. And that rotating nuclear magnet strips off electrons and creates the polar magnetosphere field, where the electrons emerge from the poles, from the North Pole, and come down in the magnetosphere and then re-enter the Earth through the South Pole. We actually have right now two South Poles. People are not aware of this. And we've also had the very rapid wandering of the North Pole, which means the engine that creates a magnetosphere, because our Earth is basically a nuclear reactor generating a plasma field that we call the magnetosphere, that protects us from the bull-shock wave of the sun, cosmic rays, background X-ray radiations, and zeta particles from deep space, and gamma bursts. The effect is to create us a shell so we don't live in what's called the boiling, called the cauldron of the lake of fire. In fact, if you want to call our universe is the lake of fire. People talk about going to hell. No, we're already there. We are living, and our worlds and our star systems are in the lake of fire already. And people don't grasp that. They'll realize without the magnetosphere, which is decreasing by 5% per decade, we'd be fried. And there's a significant increase in ultraviolet light, X-ray radiation, and cosmic rays in this part of the galaxy. And the magnetosphere is decreasing by 5% per decade, combined with a decrease in worldwide oxygen, which is not good. And the globalists are freaking right out about it. What they see in the timeline is a collapse of civilization, and they want to preserve it. So they actually think they're doing something good by not telling us what they can't fix. Just like some of the movies like The Day After Tomorrow or other we call apocalyptic movies, they're predictably programming the public to be good lemmings.
Oh boy, well that doesn't sound good, and I think you just cut to something I wanted to ask you about, and that is this disaster at Fukushima, that the Daiichi plant. We're getting reports from all over the place, particularly up and down the West Coast, about all the sea life dying and this and that, and beaching whales and all kinds of stuff, and no minnows or no sardines at all, zero.
Exactly, no salmon run, no baby orca whales, so therefore they're not singing, so you can't hear any songs of the orca orcinus, the killer whales. I would call them the wolves of the sea. They don't sing anymore because there's no baby whales. None survived a year.
Well, so what can be done about that?
Well, I wrote a book last year giving technical and specific recommendations, and the thing is, what I'm really disturbed by with the silence, not only in the media, but the alternative media, is I gave them technical answers to solve Fukushima Daiichi and personal things that will protect them, such as our Edgar Cayce monoatomic Tesla-activated iodine, DNA protection, etc. and I give them technical solutions. So I'll run down through them. The first thing we need to do is we need to build a proper diversion structure to divert the aquifer above Fukushima, because there's actually a river of water running underneath the Daiichi plant area.
Oh, yeah.
Number two, you need to build a sill wall and a retention area for water, and a way to filter that water properly, not the stupid system they have that they contracted to an American company to filter it, to turn that radioactive waste into solid material that can be taken away in special double-hulled ships. They need to cover every plant with a Kevlar spider silk tent and have an air filtration system. They need to use muon detectors to detect exactly where the corium is and insert tubes down there with hyperosmolar boronated water, and then they hit them with the proper harmonic frequency to cause what's called mega crystallization of boron, which is a neutron capture. And once you capture neutrons and shut off the water, the problem's solved, and you create a sarcophagus that's permanently monitored forever. Because some of the isotopes, like plutonium, have a half-life of 26,500 years, and depleted uranium has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. So this is not going to go away. And the problem is that nuclear fission as a use of power to boil water, as Einstein says, is insanity. But the problem is they don't want to solve it. And the reason why they don't even challenge me, as I said on the show many times, where's my abuse? I want my abuse. I deserve some abuse. I need somebody to come and controversially dare to be stupid enough to argue with me about the technical details. And if you can prove me wrong, I'll accept it, because I like to be taught. But unfortunately, what happens is I don't even see my abuse anymore. I used to get it, and where the hell is it? And the problem is, if they won't abuse you, and people that are highly qualified and scientifically valid, like the head of nuclear physics engineering, Kai Vetter, at University of California, Berkeley, who was doing testing for the first 2 years after Fukushima Daiichi, stopped immediately after I communicated with him. At first, he'd think I was just Dr. Deagle, MD, that was the usual average knucklehead doctor that gives out pills, continuing to practice medicine, never getting it right. And he realized I actually had a background in nuclear physics and radiotoxicology, and he freaked out and decided to no longer do any testing. And so the government has shut down, including even spokespeople in major media like Michio Kaku, who's head of a group of 40,000 scientists that are very concerned about this, and all of a sudden he shuts up too. So by and large, except for a few voices on the Rebs Network, and what we do is our nuclear safety expert, and his radio name, Chris Harris, that's not his real name, on Thursdays, and the people that are on the Rebs Network, like several experts he had from the journalists and so on, but none of them are nuclear experts like myself. They basically come on and try to say how bad it is, and you can go to the Rebs Network website, and he's got one of the best lists of topics. They're still trying to have the 2020 Olympics up there, which is nuts. They want to reopen more reactors. They're trying to force the Taiwanese to accept foods without proper radiation testing. I mean, it goes on with insaneness. And, of course, the explosion of jellyfish all over the world caused by the death of the oceans is another example of the death. And the invasion of the Humboldt squid, which is another plague that's spreading around the oceans of the world, caused by Fukushima Daiichi. So people say they don't want to believe this is happening. Well, and how do they listen to your program again? Can they go to caravantomidnight.com? Is that the website, Caravan to Midnight?
They can do that, and they can also go to our YouTube channel. That's just, you got to put in my name with the middle initial and all, JOHN, B as in Bravo, WELLS, and then type in CTM after that. And there's a bunch of stuff up there. They can get a good sampling of the programs that are offered there, and we have almost 300 shows in the archive, so it's a good value, I think.
Yeah, I know it's a really good value. In fact, I tell people, that's why I selectively go around trying to find people that I call are willing to ask, and this is my main tagline. I have lots of taglines, but the most important one is ask better questions. And ask questions that'll scare the bejesus out of you. Ask questions that'll make you think, oh my gosh, did I actually believe that? Ask questions that'll make you question your sanity. And the problem is a lot of people really don't achieve a higher level of consciousness than bacteria. I've worked out a theorem of 7 levels of consciousness. The top level is what I call God consciousness, so you really know the heart and mind of God. But most people, unfortunately, if they had an original thought, they'd probably die of a spontaneous human combustion. And,
are you sure we're not related? I'm beginning to think we might be. Everything's got to be somebody else's idea. But and you're conducting the interview, but let me ask you a question, Doc. And here it is. Are we looking at just walking through our future? according to the greatest playbook of them all, and that would be the Holy Scripture, otherwise known as the Bible, or are we going to mount a rebellion and invade the underground cities, demand and otherwise force these globalist elitist types to surrender the keys to the treasure trove of knowledge where we can avail ourselves of some of these technological advances, this ability to communicate with other civilizations, like off-planet life extension stuff, all that stuff? I mean, what do you see? What does your crystal ball say? You must have made one that works.
Well, here's the thing. You'll talk to different people, and they say, well, they can time travel and this. And I said, look, here's the nature of the universe. There's not infinite timelines, as you hear from people like Stuart Schwerlow. There's only one timeline, and that's because it's related to what the nature of consciousness is. If you had infinite timelines, it means that really you don't really have any free will or choice. You just have to be stuck in a specific timeline. God himself can actually change not only the future, but the past. People need to understand that. People say, that's not possible. I said, why is it impossible? What you have to understand is in our current timeline, we've made, in a sense, a collective agreement on a collective consciousness level to create this reality and timeline. And what we're trying to do, basically, by having your show and my show, is to change the consciousness and the perspective of people so that they will then make a different decision to not go down that timeline. So we collectively, think of it this way, think of everybody out there as a consciousness cow. And the globalists and the bankers and the globalists, I call it the wizards of the media, and the great dames of high-level masonry like Hillary Clinton, who's the highest-level witch in the Western world. And that's a fact. I mean, she's from the Rodham family. What they're doing is they're actually, milking us like cows for the milk of the future. So they try to convince us with the media and with education and false religion and Tier 2 science that this really is the state of reality, even though you can see real evidence, for example, that Obama's on both sides of issues, like he's supporting ISIS and dropping equipment and satellite phones. And on the other hand, he's allowing the Iranian Quds Force and the Shiite militia to call in B-2B bomber runs against the Shiite militia in these towns in there. And on the one hand, allow failure to kill a lot of Christians off in Syria, and at the same time, he's allowing Delta Force to go in at least once out of 150 requests and kill off and grab a few people in ISIS as a kind of a token measure to say, hey, yeah, we got these guys, and we got his wife and a bunch of satellite phones and computers. So we're being manipulated, and what people need to know, you're a consciousness cow in the farm of the wizards of this world. And they're trying to milk the milk of the future and create a specific timeline that they want by convincing them that this is inevitable. So people are driven by fear, ignorance, and just plain lack of perspective of the nature of what they are as a being and the nature of our responsibility to take our scepter and start ruling. So I think a lot of the problem I see is that people don't know 0 and 1 in terms of the nature of what reality is.
So we're really operating on a very primitive level, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. When I ask questions in my show, I try to operate on a level that kind of blows people away. They say, well, that can't be, that can't be. I can quote every scripture in the Bible. It says everything I say is exactly what it says in the Bible. But you'll find it also in other ancient holy books. But the clearest is actually the Bible if you understand it in what I call higher language. In other words, if you think of it in equations and archetypes and so on, and almost lines of computer code for the nature of a hyperdimensional reality of what we are and what the nature of what God is and what the universe is, you start to understand that the Bible is actually a hyperdimensional book that transcends time-space, so it's not a natural book, it's a supernatural one.
Yes.
And that there's always been individuals that have some portion of totality of that, but the greatest one was Yeshua HaMashiach, that we call the Father in the flesh. But the most profound statement he made was, when I return, you shall be as I am. So I call myself a mortar man for God, meaning I mix up the mortar, a tailor in the coat of many colors, bringing all the peoples together, because if all the peoples on Earth stop making war and start worrying about near space and cosmic things like near space objects like the approach of a dwarf star that could destroy us, if they understood about things like gamma bursts and advanced civilizations, both good and bad, and how they've been manipulating us, then they might change their perspective about their geopolitics. They might realize that the human race could apprehend life extension technology, zero-point energy, and nuclear fusion technology, but we're restrained by a bunch of global maniacs that literally are serving us up as an astral sacrifice to the reptilian gods. And people think, no, that can't be. Unfortunately, it's true. We're on a a war on the genetic, geopolitical, strategic, religious, and scientific level. In every area, we are at war. There's no such area that's not at war.
Well, and it seems that it's no different in what the Bible refers to as maybe we do, as the celestial realm. It's, as you just said, some of the civilizations out there are good, some of them are not so good. So,
right.
And you remember that whole deal with Daniel and the lion's den? It's like, where you been? It's like, well, we had this thing going up in the celestial realm. Well, what? Well, it was a big brawl. Well, how bad was it? Well, it's pretty bad because we had to call. You got me doing it now, Bill.
Right. You're talking about where he was restrained by the Prince of Persia. When the angel was going to come and talk to him over the river Chebar in Elam, right?
Yeah. And in the end, he said, Daniel asked him, well, how bad did it get? I'm paraphrasing quite a bit here. And he goes, well, pretty bad. We had to call Michael in, if that tells you anything. It's like, wow, it really was serious.
And Michael, by the way, means one who has the voice and power of the Most High God. So that shows you a pretty powerful angel.
I'm thinking that's absolutely true. So it's the same. It's the same thing up there as it is down here.
Only it's at a much more dramatic level. And the problem people don't understand, hyperspace is the realm of the negentropic world. And people got to realize that we live in a hologram. The physical world is a hologram. The spiritual level is a higher level hologram that we call negentropic. It literally creates order out of the chaos of our lower realm. But it's a higher realm. This is where the great opposer, Satan, exists, where the angel exists, where advanced civilizations exist, where advanced councils like the Council of the Eschaton exists, where, if you want to call it, it's not the highest realm, but it's a higher realm than Earth. And one of the problems is people don't believe in what I call spiritual pathogens or memes, transdimensional entities, or what we call possession or oppression, which, of course, a lot of people say, I believe the Bible. I say, well, do you believe that Jesus cast out demons? And, well, no, I don't know if I believe that, man. That's pretty weird. And I wouldn't go to a church that does that. I'd say, stay away from that. Well, I said, well, then how can you say you are a Christian if you don't believe this? I said, well, he'd even say, is it easier to say your sins are forgiven or pick up your mat and walk? And what he's really saying is there's no difference. The only way to do good is to hear and do the will of the greatest or highest God, and anything other than that is evil. And people don't understand that's the basis of the fact that we're a sovereign individual in a sovereign nation, and they're trying to turn us back into what I call feudal serfs in a cybernetic, control freak, technocratic world where the global maniacs create a caste society that are genetically and cybernetically enhanced to the overclasses. And people say, no, they're not doing that. I said, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing.
That's exactly
it's like a Hindu version of the Matrix. And John, one of the things you mentioned on the break was that there's a kind of like a, if you want to call it, I call fear soup, or instead of making chocolate bars, you were making fear bars. And it's really hard to get away from all this stuff because people keep on quoting reality. To be honest with you, they quote their slice of reality, like whether it's a naval expert or somebody else or a financial expert, doom and gloom, the world's financial system is going to crash, or the world's going to get fried by a dwarf star or some other horror. What people need to understand is the nature of what we are as beings, and that fear is, if you want to call it, the primary product of the global elite. It's like they want to make sure that all of us eat a number of our fear bars every day, so we're in a total state of paralysis, and they can do whatever they please, and their best way is to quote reality, or their version of reality.
Yeah.
What type of, and the way to get out of that paradigm is to start realizing there's a solution to every problem. In fact, I've said on my show, if you can present me with any problem, physical, geopolitical, financial, nuclear, whatever, and if I don't have an answer, I'll give you a framework to imagineer the pathway to an answer. And so people say, that's not possible. I said, well, if I can do it, and I can marshal 10,000 scientists to fix Fukushima, generate new energy technology, start communicating with other star civilizations across the galaxy, start to really understand the nature of what we are as a being so we can truly worship and behave in the manner of the Most High God, because there is a God of the universe. And these advanced civilizations, they would not exist or survive unless they, number one, understood that. That's the facts. And now people may say, well, that's not possible. I said, well, God incarnated as Jesus in this world, but it certainly didn't stop God from incarnating in a billion worlds just in our galaxy alone. And people need to understand, our God's a very big God, not a little God. He's not in a little box that has to have a 7,000-year-old world. He's a God where you can have a world that doesn't have a big bang, that literally is worlds upon worlds forever. And our God is still God, still worried about every hair on your head and the fact your civilization is suicidal. So how do you get beyond this negative crap that they keep on feeding us, including the alternative media that kind of wallows in it? That's why I call most of the internet, I call it the sewer net, and much of the so-called the alternative media networks just scare the craps out of people. They just say, I don't want to turn this on.
It's funny you should say that, because today on the program, I said, listen, folks, I really, I don't want this to be some sort of an angst fest. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing you any favors by even reporting these stories. Now, I'll continue to tell you about them because you might find interest in them, but it's really more of a, I think the best way to combat this is, this may seem a little simplistic, but I think it's with humor. I mean, for example, you got a president up here that delivers this keynote address to the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, right? And he's saying that it is refusing to deal with climate change is dereliction of duty. I mean, is this guy something or is he something? So it's almost can you believe what these morons have done now? Just listen to this. And there's a guy in England. He's not in England. He's in Germany, actually, and he's an Englishman who works in Germany. And his whole deal is don't occupy anything. Unoccupy. Or as I like to say, vacate. It doesn't really matter what they do. You don't have to participate, really, in very much of it. And you certainly don't have to walk on the side of your head every day of your life worrying about all this stuff that they put out there, because it's designed to do exactly what you said. It's to keep everybody churned up and confused and distracted, and fear. That's the drug. That's the most effective drug. So my question to you is, how do we mount a rebellion on a spiritual level?
Well, I actually have a very simple answer that Jesus himself said in one of his last words. He said, though you do it to the least of my brothers and sisters, you'll do it to me. And he said, and they asked me, so Master, what is the summary of the Ten Commandments? He said, there's only two really, and the rest all fall under it. Love the Lord your God with your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that means not just our neighbor here in this physical world, but your neighbor organisms on the planet, and also the galactic organisms across the whole cosmos. Because we are going to eventually make, quote, publicly first contact, which, of course, our governments already have. What people need to understand is there is a God of the universe. He did come here and incarnated Yeshua HaMashiach. He did give us the plans. And recently, if everyone was a hyper-empath like me, which means we can feel the pain of someone else that I'm talking to thousands of miles away, or diagnose what's wrong with them, if they could feel a plant that needs water and they walk by it, if they could literally know their dog needs water in their dish and hasn't been fed yet, if they actually could feel the pain of dropping a sulfur bomb on a little Palestinian girl from a helicopter driven by the Israeli Air Force, or they can feel the danger of a Katyusha rocket coming in on an Israeli village, people wouldn't do it. They wouldn't be building nuclear weapons when they could see, literally with their own mind's eye, the flash of X-rays before the thermal blast of high-energy sound is created from superheating the air to 10 million degrees. It would create a pulse of infrared light that would turn people into dust instantly. They wouldn't do it. The problem is, you see, there's a lack of empathy. And it says in the Bible that the love of many will wax cold. That's the really central part of the whole problem. If the love of many would not wax cold but wax warm, so we'd be totally empathic, all of the problems would disappear. In fact, we would get real religion instead of real lies going on. We'd get real politics, which means we'd have a real election, not a selection. So they give us a bunch of fools on both sides of parties. I call it the Republic crap and the Democrat, but either one, you're going to get crap. And the only candidate I see so far that could potentially be good is Rand Paul, but we got to steer him so he doesn't lick, as they say in British lingo, lick spittle the British butt and the Israelis, that allow them to commit suicide by starting a war that they can't stop. And we know that their own Green Pine radar and system and their Iron Dome will not protect them from thousands of rockets coming in. That the only people safe will be in bunkers, and the Israeli population, 7 million of them, will all die in a hail of rockets, from bottle-sized to big damn rockets. And, of course, it'll mean that Israelis will use the Samson option to target every city within 10,000 miles plus, including Moscow and Beijing. And the problem, people don't realize that, as Einstein says, he doesn't know exactly how and when the Third World War will be fought, but he knows the Fourth World War will be fought with sticks and stones, if there's a human race left, or some degenerate version of the human race that's crawling out of caves 1,000 years from now. So I understand this because we have evidence that there was a nuclear war around 4,500 years ago between Ashurbanipal, India, and Yemen and Saudi Arabia, we have obsidian. You can go to Riyadh, and they'll actually sell you trinkets of sand that was converted to obsidian glass that they considered after the last nuclear war that hit Saudi Arabia. You can find evidence that we had a war probably 13,000 years ago plus in the ancient world of one of the earlier versions of what we call the kingdoms of Atlantis and Mu. People think this is legend. It's not. It's not. And the fact is, the human race has risen and fallen multiple times, and this is probably, as I said, the last time at bat. And human races better get it this time. And the problem is they aren't. And the issue comes right down to one thing. You know, are you your brother's and your nation's keeper? Are you the keeper of orca whales that are dying because you won't fix Fukushima and they don't have babies anymore so they won't sing? That's what makes me nauseated to be a human. It makes me grieve, as Jesus and God said, basically, when he spoke to Moses and said, I grieve that I created man, and I shall create stones out of my own people. I shall take the stones of the desert and turn them to my people. And then Moses spoke up and said, blot out my name from the book of life. And God said, no, I'm not going to blot out your name, Moses. I can't do that. But I'm going to bring judgment on this people because they won't. They're stiff-necked and they're stubborn. And I see that with people who call themselves righteous Christians, righteous Muslims, righteous Buddhists, righteous agnostics, righteous transhumanists, whatever they are. They're all righteous, and it makes me sick. I don't know what to say. It just makes me ill. And I wish people would just get it. What do you think, John?
I'm hearing some other stuff out there.
Yeah. What are you hearing?
Sounds a lot like a break.
No, we're not on break yet. No, we're not on a break for 2 minutes. There may be a speaker in the background. No. We're going to break in 2 minutes, so you can blast through. We're going to get you back on, but you know, I have ranting spells. It's one of my birth defects, let's say it. But you know, I get emotional over this. I don't just do this for late night TV, radio kind of entertainment to scare people. I want them to realize we have a real choice as to whether we have a future as a human race or not. But I think the days are closing.
Well, I tell you, I think the thing that we need to do first and foremost is turn away completely from mainstream media and let them feel it. And contact the sponsors and tell them we're not buying it. We're not buying your products. If you advertise on this, we're not buying them. That's it. We're going to call all our friends. We're going to mobilize against you, and we're going to hurt you.
That's a good one too. Not just don't listen to them. Don't buy their products. They advertise in those networks.
Without
tell the network companies, if you advertise in this network, like I call Fox or False News Network, CNN the Cartoon News Network, MSNBC the Vomit News Network, etc. If you advertise in those networks, we're not buying your stuff. We're not going to your restaurants. We're not doing it. That's a good idea. Ooh, radical.
When they start getting the emails in there by the thousands, they'll pay attention, and they'll either go away or they'll change what they're doing. But this has got to stop.
Yeah, well, like that last commercial on Mad Men, it says we need to buy the world a Coke. We need to buy the world some empathy.
Yeah, we do. Coke and a smile.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks for coming on the program and putting up with me, John. We'll get you back on soon.